Hello, it's Junebug, and welcome back. Oh, Happy New Year! I had a feeling I would not be back in 2022. And I was right. The holidays obviously got in the way of me doing research, and my jobs pick up, because I have two jobs, pick up a lot during the holiday season. New special guest, got him for Christmas. He doesn't have a name, he's just a snowman. He looked cute, so I thought he could be here. You're not too Christmassy or anything, just 'cause it's winter still, it's wintry. But anyway, I hope you all had some nice holidays or some time off, or just not a sucky time in general. Today will be a bit of a longer video, I'm guessing, because there's a lot of info. And again, disclaimer maybe, I obviously don't know every single fact about this case, so if there's something I leave out or something where like a fact is a different source is a different thing, I'm obviously not an expert, just so y'all know. Granted, I don't think anyone is coming here for my expertise. Anyway, today we are talking about infamous case which I had not heard of. There's most of the things I've covered I have not heard of. But I was more surprised I hadn't heard of this due to it taking place in Chicago or like on the outskirts of Chicago, which is only about 3.5 hours away from where I live in Michigan. And since it's so like famous, quote unquote, infamous famous, whichever is your favorite word, I was surprised I hadn't heard of it. But today we are covering Barbara and Patricia Grimes, or sometimes they're just referred to as the Grimes sisters. And this happened December 28th of 1956. Now, the ages are, the sisters were 15 and 12. It's debated if she was 13 or not, because it was around her birthday. We'll get into it. And it says this is in Brighton Park, Illinois. And then some sources said Chicago, so I don't know if that's an outskirt, like a suburb of Chicago. I'm not quite sure. And unfortunately, this case is unsolved. I don't feel like I've covered a ton of those on this channel. I feel like with older cases, granted, I mean, this isn't like super old, but the photos are still going to be black and white. But I feel like with older cases, it's either cut and dry, they know, or no idea. I guess it's still the same today. But to get started, I didn't see much on their upbringing or about their family in general. They had other siblings. It wasn't just the two sisters. I know that much. But they had, I think, a decent life. I didn't see much about it. But on December 28th of 1956, the two sisters, Barbara Grimes and Patricia Grimes, and Barbara was born May 5th, 1941, making her 15. And Patricia was born December 31st. This is why the age thing comes into play. But she was born December 31st, 1943, making her 12, almost 13. And they both were born in Cook County, Illinois. And they were, I wrote it down. They were 2 out of 7 kids born to Joseph and Loretta Grimes. And they went to a screening of the Elvis Presley film, Love Me Tender, at a Brighton Park theater. It said that Patricia and Barbara were inseparable. They were both very good students and had recently joined Elvis's official fan club, which is cute. I don't know if that's still around. Maybe it is. But this was the 11th time the sisters would see this film, which is a lot. They left home at about 7:30 p.m., and they said they would be home by midnight. They had $2.50 in their possession, and they either walked or rode the bus for the 1.5 miles to the theater. Wasn't stated which one was which, but they're 1.5 miles away. And one of Patricia's school friends, remember Patricia's the younger one, almost 13, sat behind them during the film, and the friend and her sister left at intermission at 9:30 p.m. because it was a double feature. And they saw the sisters getting more popcorn. And they said they seemed to be in good spirits. They love Elvis and seeing his new movie. and the girls were expected to be home at about 11:45 p.m. And when they hadn't shown up by midnight, Mom Loretta sent 17-year-old Teresa and 14-year-old Joey to the closest bus stop to wait for them. Maybe she's like, well, maybe the buses are running late, maybe the show was running late, maybe they saw a friend. Just go wait for them. Meaning Loretta was calling the girls' friends to see if they had them over, and it came up with nothing, unfortunately. After 3 buses had come and gone, the siblings returned home empty-handed. So, worried more now, Loretta called the Chicago Police Department at 2:15 a.m. on December 29th to report her daughters missing. I feel like this has got to be one of parents' worst nightmares. There's probably many. But, like, they're going to a movie, you're always worried, like, what if they don't come back? And they didn't come back. That's terrifying. But people fortunately sprung into action. It's actually one of the largest missing persons cases in Cook County. I don't know how big Cook County is, but still. Now, a citywide search quickly initiated, to which hundreds of officers were assigned full-time. I don't know how they had that many to spare, but good for them. And a task force was created solely to find them. Again, seems crazy, but very helpful. Now, starting December 29th, hundreds of local volunteers joined the search. Police did door-to-door canvassing. Canals and rivers were dredged, which I had to look up exactly what it meant. I knew it meant, like, searching the water, but it's basically pulling things out of the water to see what's in it. Not like with your hands, but they use, like, a big machine. Because I know there's different ways you can check water. I know sometimes there'll be divers, sometimes just, like, being in a boat and looking with, like, sonar or something, or sometimes if it's a man-made thing, they'll try to drain it. But they did dredging. You probably didn't need that explanation, but I thought it was interesting. And over 15,000 flyers were distributed. That's a lot. And a church offered $1,000 for any info. I don't think anything ever came from that, though. Then over 300,000 people would be questioned. That is insane. 2,000 of them would go through serious interrogations, and barely any hard evidence came from this at all. Like, nothing. Which is even crazier to me. Now, many people at the theater the same night as the girls stated they had seen the girls talking to a man who sort of looked like Elvis. We obviously can guess it was not Elvis, so don't worry about that. They also saw the sisters get into his car. Not good, but the car was described as being a Mercury model, which I'm not a car person. An image does not pop into my head when that's told to me, so I'm going to put some Mercury models up here for you to see, if you're like me. Side note, it was believed heavily the girls could have run away from home at first, because they are older, maybe in a rebellious stage in their life. They maybe were thought to be staying with boyfriends around that age, especially with Barbara being 15. She might want to be hanging with her boyfriends more. Or they thought maybe they were trying to, quote-unquote, live like Elvis. Like more free, just more rock and roll, something like that. Or they thought maybe they were trying to see him in concert in Tennessee. These are just theories. None of them, like, were grounded too much. I could see maybe where they were thinking, because you don't want to automatically go to the worst possible scenario at first. Like, your mind might go there, but you want to, like, really believe that's not the case. Like, maybe they're just being rebellious or something. Maybe they just want to be like Elvis. But again, these were theories. None of them were, like, substantiated with evidence. And then, speaking of the king, Elvis himself got involved, using the radio to plead to the girls. He was also seen on TV saying, quote, "If you are good Presley fans, you'll go home and ease your mother's worries," end quote. And this happened on January 19th. So based off that date, you can tell this was going on for weeks, and nothing was coming from any of this. None of these searches, none of these interrogations, none of these questionings, nothing was coming up. So 4 weeks after the girls go missing, on January 22nd, 1957, a construction worker named Leonard Prescott spotted 2 bodies on the side of German Church Road. He thought they were mannequins at first, and when he investigated further, because he thought that was kind of weird, he realized the forms were the nude and frozen bodies of the Grimes sisters, which is just horrible. I can't imagine being in that situation where you're like, did someone just put a mannequin out here, or did it fall off the back of a truck? Because if he drives trucks, maybe his mind's like, something must have fallen off a truck. And you go and look, and it's bodies. That must be insane. And it was believed, because it wasn't that far from like where they went missing, that it was believed the girls were driven and dumped there, unfortunately. They were, again, naked. Their bodies had shown bruising, injuries resembling blunt force trauma to the head, wounds thought to have been caused by an ice pick. Because remember, this is end of December, in January in Illinois, it's cold. After their father, Joseph, identified them, over 160 officers and volunteers searched the crime scene, which is a lot. And they just have the picture of the bodies found on the side of the road. It's a small area, and to fit 160 people on it is insane. And all of this provided little to no evidence again. But it is criticized due to so many people being there. They thought maybe it was trampled, it was kicked, it was just, there was too many people, and a lot of them, volunteers, they're not professional. They don't know exactly what to do. So I do think it's law enforcement's fault for not getting volunteers out of there. It should have just been the professional, like mandated people, and not 160 of them. And autopsies were performed the next day, and they were performed by 3 experienced forensic pathologists, and there were 5-hour exams of each body, which I don't know if that's fast, slow, average, I don't know. And none of them could agree on the date or cause of death. And these are experienced forensic pathologists. And they each had I don't know if they each had 5 hours with the body, or it was 5 hours in total for each body. I don't know. They agreed death most likely occurred within 5 hours after being seen alive at the theater due to their stomach contents. So either late December 28th or very early December 29th. All 3 agreed on shock and exposure for the cause of death for both girls. They also thought the wounds and punctures were done after death by rodents / animals picking at them. And no quote-unquote fatal wounds were discovered. Neither had been drunk, they weren't drugged, they didn't find like poison in their system. Their clothing was never found though, which is a bit weird. And it stated the bodies were markedly clean. Markedly clean? Cleaner than you would expect is what I'm getting at. Now Barbara, who was 15, she was the older sister, most likely they mentioned had sex around the time of her death, but there was no evidence of forcible molestation found, so that means it could have just been like her the day before, maybe just had sex with like her boyfriend or something. They don't know for certain. There's just evidence that she had sexual intercourse before she passed. Now, the death certificates would list the cause of death as murder, with the specific means being listed as secondary shock from the very low temps. It was a huge snowstorm around this time. Side note, the bodies were believed to be in decent condition due to all the snow and ice and cold temps. They thought maybe they were buried for a while under all the snow and ice, and then with some thawing, that's why they were able to be seen. But again, they don't know for certain. But that could also be why they were cleaner because, I mean, it's water. But again, that's just a theory. Now, despite these initial statements, the chief investigator for the Cook County Coroner's Office, say that fast 3 times, Harry Gloss was his name, disagreed with the time of death about the rodents being cause for like their punctures and some minor wounds. And they believed the girls were held captive somewhere and were sexually assaulted until about January 7th. He had not a ton of... I don't know quite sure why he thought this. I'm sure if I dug deeper, I could find out why he thought this. I think I have a little bit in here why. I think something about their stomach contents had maybe more than what they had last eaten, but then they also have what they last... It's confusing. He just didn't believe any of it. But Harry Gloss, the Cook County Coroner's Office guy, keeps saying things like this so much. Like, he thought the forensic pathologist and everyone else saying, like, what I first told you, what's initially believed, that they were just saying that to spare their reputation or to spare their mother's feelings, which, I mean, their girls are already gone. They want to know the truth, so I doubt that's the case. But he would get fired for saying all this stuff all the time. He would later say he was fired due to political manipulation or something like that. Maybe there is a slim chance he was 100% right and nothing the pathologist says or the other officers said is true, but it sounds like he was a bit off the rails. Again, nothing for certain. It basically sounds like he's not right in this situation. But they did have some main suspects to go off of here. So the first suspect was Edward Bedwell, who Harry Gloss thought was the main culprit. And it was substantial when you first hear about it, because Edward Bedwell was a 21-year-old drifter who was tall and allegedly bore a strong resemblance to Elvis. Because remember, people who saw the girls at the theater saw they were talking with someone who sort of looked like Elvis. He was also seen, quote unquote seen, it's not for certain, with 2 girls resembling the Grimes sisters on December 30th. Now, Bedwell was arrested and interrogated for 3 days, and on the 4th day signed a 14-page confession. He stated him and an acquaintance, William Cole Willingham, were with the girls until the 7th. Remember, Harry Gloss had the theory that the girls were held captive until about the 7th. And on the 7th of January, Edward said they fed them hot dogs, like they were having hot dogs and drinks or whatever that day. But he mentioned the hot dog specifically, and that comes into play. They said they beat them after the girls refused their sexual advances, and they beat them so much and then just left them naked in the ditch, and that's what caused them to perish, unfortunately. Now, this sounds like kind of cut and dry. I was thinking, yeah, he does sound like he probably did it. But it's kind of been proven it's not him due to he did recant his confession, for starters, because he said he confessed due to pressure, and he was there for 4 days being interrogated. And this has been seen in other cases where people just confess to leave, or due to they're exhausted, they just feel like they won't be allowed to leave unless they say they did it. Now, that doesn't mean he's innocent, but there has been cases where it shows some people will just confess to get away. 2, the autopsy showed no hot dogs that he insisted they ate on the 7th. And there wasn't any alcohol in their systems either, because he said they had hot dogs and beer, I believe it was. None of that was in their system. But it showed they were not beaten to death. They had some bruising and something they said resembled an ice pick, but they weren't just like beaten, like with just fists to death, the autopsies showed. 3, this one really kind of disproves him, was he was clocked in at work from 4:19 p.m. December 28th to 12:30 a.m. December 29th, most likely the time of the girl's abduction. And then 4, he was confirmed to be clocked in and working on the day he said he murdered the girls. So I kind of personally believe that he did confess just because he thought that's what the police wanted. Because if he's clocked in, like, they see him at work, he's clocked in when this is happening, I feel like there's no way it's him, right? Again, I don't know everything, obviously. Maybe it was him. But he never was, like, tried for this or anything. Like, he's free, I think. I don't know what he's up to nowadays or if he's alive or not, but Edward Bedwell was, like, disproved. The second main suspect was Max Fleig, F-L-E-I-G. We're just going to call him Max. But he was 17 and was suspected of killing the girls. I could not find why, but they suspected him killing the girls. But he took a polygraph test and failed, so he quote-unquote confessed, just like Edward did. But there was no physical evidence linking him to the crime. None. And his story didn't line up that he told when he confessed. So it kind of sounds like another Edward Bedwell situation, but not as intense. Does that make sense? Now the third and final main suspect that I could find, there's many smaller suspects, was a man named Walter Kranz, who was 53 years old. He was a steam lifter and a quote-unquote psychic. He insisted he was psychic. Like, he didn't have like a little shop or anything with a crystal ball. He said he was psychic. Just like a lot of his family members, he said. But he called police with his vision about the girls' bodies' location. And the bodies were found a mile from his stated location. Now, it's not an exact match, but that is pretty dang close. But again, no evidence linked him to this at all. And he also confessed to heavily drinking the night he had his vision. I could see how they were suspicious and they're trying to find the answer. I could totally understand that, but I don't know if I'd... He was drinking and had a vision. A vision, quote unquote. So take that for what you will. Now let's get to the aftermath of this. Now the funds raised for the Grimes family, because they were unable to work during this time because they're trying to find their children, they were able to pay off the rest of their mortgage, which is nice. I think they prefer their children, but they paid off their mortgage. And they were able to pay for both the girls' funerals. The wake was held on January 25th. Barbara and Patricia were laid to rest at the Holy Sepulchre Cemetery in Alsip, Illinois on January 28th of 1957. And they were buried side by side. Some pallbearers were Barbara's classmates, and that had to be rough, carrying one of your classmates' bodies to their grave. In May 1957, Loretta Grimes received an unknown, remember Loretta's their mother, received an unknown phone call from someone claiming to be the killer. Now this person stated, quote, "I know something about your little girl that no one else knows, not even the police. The smallest girl's toes were crossed at the feet," end quote. Patricia did have an unusual, like, thing with her toes. I think it was like kind of like the one next to the big toe, I think, was a bit crossed over the big toe. I think I didn't see like a picture of her toes, but I think that's what they were referencing. Now Loretta, the mom, believed the crime was committed by someone they may know, or else her girls wouldn't have gotten in the car with them. And I can understand that logic. And in 2013, we're jumping way ahead here, a retired police officer named Raymond Johnson began a personal investigation into the case. He believes the case could still be solved with the public's help, and believes the killer could have been 23-year-old Charles Leroy Melquist. Melquist? Melquist? Now, Melquist was convicted of killing 15-year-old Bonnie Leigh Scott, whose body was found less than 10 miles from the sisters' bodies. And they showed similarities in the murder and body disposal. He was never questioned or charged for this, and he did pass away in 2010. Silver lining, silver lining is he did serve prison time for killing Bonnie, but they gave him a 99-year sentence, which sounds good to me, but they only had him serve 11. He served 11 years for killing a human. And since he's gone, they can't question him about the Grimes sisters. I guess they're hoping, well, Raymond mainly, because he's like head of this personal investigation now, hoping that with the public's help, someone knows something, or something was said by like grandparents about this case or something like that to try and solve it. Now, as of 2013, their little brother is still alive and he hopes the case can still be solved. I don't know if he's currently alive 10 years later. He could be. Certainly could be. But again, I don't know for certain. And unfortunately, that is the case. So much time and energy was poured into this, and yet nothing really came from it. I know that that's part of why it's criticized a bit, because they did too much. Like, they may have overlooked stuff, or it was too much information at once, like very conflicting views. But I can understand trying to solve it as quick as you can to get the person, whoever did this. Unfortunately, nothing new ever popped up while I was doing my research for this. Maybe in the future, this case will be solved. It would be nice. Or maybe it was Melquist. In that case, I mean, he's off the streets. He's dead. If it was one of the 3 original suspects, they got away, unfortunately. But I don't know if they did it, obviously. That is it for today's true crime. As usual, I will try to link the graves below, so if you want to leave kind words only or a flower, you can. Or you can learn more about their immediate family, if it interests you. And then I also wanted to ask Charles Melquist about how he killed Bonnie, and they didn't really give any info on that. They just said that he killed her and might be linked to the Grimes sisters. Would you be interested if I did a video on her? Because I feel like her story should also be told. Granted, I can't tell all the stories that ever happened with true crime, that would take too long, but I feel like since she's mentioned, she should have her story told as well. Well, let me know if you'd be interested in that. Hope you enjoyed. And if you know anything by chance about the Grimes sisters, contact the police, please. Anyway, see you next time. It will be this year. I'm very slow with these. I have 2 jobs. I'm a busy lady. Thank you for watching, especially if you made it through the whole video. And see you next time. Bye, guys.